Hey there, Careblazer, welcome back. In today's video, I want to talk about some signs that suggest your loved one with dementia may no longer be safe to live alone or to be left alone for extended periods of time. In most cases, dementia, the impairments and the challenges that come along with dementia declines with time. It changes with time. So there are people right now who have dementia who are living alone and who are safe to do so. And there are people with dementia right now who need 24/7 care. And of course, there are many people with dementia somewhere in between. And as the decline happens in dementia, how do you know whether your loved one is safe to be left alone? So I'm going to share with you some signs to be on the lookout for that would suggest, oh, I think we're reaching that area where my loved one cannot be left home alone at all anymore or might need more supervision. I'm also going to personally share with you my favorite way to assess and determine whether somebody's okay to be left alone. This is a question that I ask all of my patients when I see them, and I'm trying to decide whether or not they are okay to be left alone. It's not the entire assessment, but it's one very quick and easy question that I ask, and then there's a couple follow-up questions. I'm going to share that with you because you can do it yourself with your loved one. I think it's really important that your loved one with dementia stays as safe as possible and doesn't end up being one of these stories that we read about in the newspaper or on the news of some tragedy that happens because they are home alone and they shouldn't be. Now, accidents happen all the time. Tragedies happen that are totally accidents and mistakes. But when it comes to something like dementia, at some point, everybody who has dementia needs some type of assistance and supervision. So this video is hopefully going to help guide you to determine where your loved one's at right now in the process. All right, before I get started with those signs, I am excited to let you know that tomorrow, if you have not already signed up, sign up. It's completely free. I'm hosting a live Q&A session, which basically means for an hour, you have access to me to be able to ask me whatever question you want. It's usually something that I only do for my Care Course members, but a few times a year, I like to open it up and offer it to everybody. So if you have a question you want me to answer, or you just want to watch and learn from other people's questions, all you have to do is click on the link below this video, enter your information, and you'll get all the details on how to join me tomorrow live for a question and answer session. I hope to see many of you there. All right, Careblazer, let's get started with these signs. Now, it's important to note that these are just signs. It doesn't mean that it's a requirement that you swoop in and have your loved one get 24/7 care right away, but they're kind of warning signs. So if you notice any of these in your loved one, just like raise your awareness a little bit, monitor a little bit more closely, and kind of plant the seed about whether or not it might be time for your loved one to have a little bit more supervision. Some common indications that your loved one may no longer be safe to be left alone for long periods of time are if your loved one cooks and forgets to turn off the stove, if they smoke and aren't appropriately putting out their cigarette, if they light candles and are forgetting to blow them out, and all of the other many ways that people can start a fire. I once worked with a person who had dementia and lived in a small apartment complex and nearly burned down his entire apartment complex because he burned several candles. He loved burning candles and he was forgetting to blow out the candles. So it can be a pretty serious thing. But this doesn't necessarily mean your loved one needs to be moved to a higher level of care. There are some things that get your brains starting to think about things like, can you disable the stove? Can we make sure no new candles are brought into the home? Can we make sure there are smoke detectors that are working all throughout the apartment or home? So just some raising the safety there a bit. Another sign to kind of look out for would be if you are at your loved one's house or apartment and you notice there's a lot of expired or moldy food in the fridge, or maybe not very much food in the fridge. So this could mean that your loved one's either having a hard time getting to the grocery store and getting fresh groceries, or your loved one may no longer be able to tell that food is gone bad and they might be eating it. So you kind of want to figure out which of the two it is. Like, are they having a hard time cleaning out the fridge and just getting rid of the food? Are they having a hard time going to the grocery store and buying new food? Are they having a hard time differentiating whether this food is safe to eat or not? With dementia, the taste buds not only diminish, the smell diminishes. So it's really hard sometimes when we can smell something has gone bad, the person with dementia may not. And again, this is a case where it doesn't necessarily mean they need to be moved into a higher level of care right away, but maybe if they're having a hard time getting to the grocery store, you sign them up for online grocery delivery and you order the food that gets delivered to their home. Or during your weekly visit, you also make it a point to clean out their fridge of moldy or expired foods. Another sign to look out for would be if your loved one has unexplained cuts, bruises, scrapes, scars on their body, right? This can be an indication that they're falling. So here you want to take an inventory of their environment. Are there area rugs that are trip hazards or other trip hazards around that you can help, minimize the chance of them falling? They may also just need to be evaluated for adaptive equipment like a walker or a cane to help them move around safer. Another big sign to be concerned about would be if your loved one is so trusting and friendly that they allow strangers into the home. I cannot tell you how many horrible stories I have personally worked with where people with dementia have been just taken advantage of for their entire life savings. If your loved one is somebody who is letting strangers into the home and doesn't really understand that that's not a safe thing to do, that's a really big concern that your loved one might not be safe to live at home. And they're at really high risk to be financially exploited. Medication. If your loved one's on some really significant medications that are really important for them to take, and maybe even medications that if they take it incorrectly can cause really severe consequences like insulin, then this is something that should also raise some red flags that they might need more supervision. Whether it's if they're taking some easier medications without a lot of need for adjustment, maybe it's an automatic pill dispenser with a phone call every day at the times they take the medication to remind them. If it's something a little bit more serious, it might again be a place where you want to take pause and think about whether your loved one might be ready for that next level of care. All right, and then finally, the biggie, what I ask all of my patients when I'm assessing them, one of the questions I ask all of my patients when I'm assessing them about whether they are safe to live alone is how to get help in an emergency. I ask them, if there was an emergency and you needed help right away, immediately, what would you do? And it is amazing the range of responses I will get for this. Like the answer here is you would call 911, right? So when you ask your loved one this, you don't want to tell them that answer, obviously, but you want to see what they will say. You might be shocked at some of the answers that you will get. So sometimes they might give you an answer that sounds kind of okay, but truly it's not an emergency. So for example, you might ask your loved one, how do you get help in an emergency? If there is an emergency where you needed help right away and you couldn't wait, what would you do, right? And so some of them might say, well, I would call you. I'd call my daughter, I'd call my son. And then I would say, well, what if they weren't available? What if they didn't answer the phone? What would you do? And then I might get a response like, well, I'll call my doctor. And I'll say, well, what if the doctor's office is closed and they're not answering the phone? What would you do, right? And they never get to the point where they would call 911. So then I will get even more specific and I will say, what is a number that you can dial, that anybody in the US can dial if there's an emergency and you needed help quickly? I'll even sometimes give them a phone and say, show me how to press the numbers. Show me the numbers, what you would press. And they're unable to do it. So this is a really big indication to me that this person is not safe to be home alone, because if there was a fire, a break-in, they started experiencing significant chest pain, stroke symptoms, whatever it was, they're not going to be able to dial those 3 digits to get them the help that they need right away. Now, the other piece I evaluate is if the person understands what an emergency is. So sometimes somebody might be able to say, I would, call 911. And I'll say, great, tell me an example of when you would call 911. Like, and I want to know, like, do they understand when to call 911? And so there you might be able to educate a little bit more. But it's also a red flag and a sign if they're not able to understand some of the really big symptoms that they should call 911. Like, you can even ask them, maybe on a later date, like, what would you do if you started having really bad chest pains? What would you do if all of a sudden there was somebody trying to break into your home? I have some people with dementia who will say, well, I would try to get my gun and I would fight them off. And I'm like, right? That's not the answer we're looking for here. So again, it's kind of getting more on their judgment. Like, do they know what an emergency is? Do they appropriately know how to respond to an emergency? These questions can be pretty eye-opening. You'd think it'd be pretty simple, and you would be shocked at some of the responses that you might be hearing. So that's my simple question that I like to ask everybody when I'm starting to evaluate whether or not they're safe to live at home. And if they don't get that question right, it's going to be really hard to convince me that you're safe to be left home alone. Now, some people, there's a medical alert device, right, that they can wear around their neck, and I encourage that a lot for a lot of the patients that I see. But they have to know to push it. They have to have good enough memory to know that they have that around their neck and that they can push it, and they have to know what an emergency is so that they know when to push it, right? Sometimes people think it's like a false sense of security. My loved one has this medical alert device, this button that they can press, but it's like, do they remember it? Are they wearing it? Do they know what an emergency is? So you might have to get a little bit more in depth with the questioning. I hope that helps you, Careblazer, kind of start to plant the seed about where in the disease process your loved one is in terms of needing a higher level of care. And that higher level of care might just be more family check-ins, having somebody in the house during normal waking hours. It might be moving to an assisted living facility, anywhere in between. But I do think it's an important seed to plant in your mind right now, because at some point, everybody with dementia is going to need more help. Okay, Careblazer, I know this isn't exactly the most fun and happy topic, but it's a serious one and an important one, and I hope that it helps you. Again, I hope to see many of you with my live Q&A happening tomorrow. Sign up below, and I'll be back next week as always with another video. You can leave any of your questions for future videos below, and I'll be sure to take a look at them. Okay, Careblazer, keep up the good work. Bye. Welcome back, Careblazer. In today's video, I want to talk about some signs that safety would be, like throw rugs. Are there unnecessary area carpet? What kind of trouble am I having here?